we going to start with where we are?
Absolutely.
We could have a discussion, and I'm not pretending to be anybody's leader. I just have been in this cave, okay? So I could take you into the cave. You could have fun in there. You could scream. You could run away in horror. You could be baffled by it. You could be amused by it, depending on how much madness you've experienced. We could talk about the everyday conditions that exist at the heart or in the mind of the existential individual. We're all the existential individual. We're all beings in relationship to various things, including our own realization of death, the conditions of the world in which we are immersed, the economic conditions, the social conditions, the personal relationships that we have. All these various things that go into it, and these are all fair game for discussion, and how much they influence us, and the levels of what people like to call happiness or unhappiness can be involved. I don't like to use the word happy. I want to reserve that for something that's permanent. I find that people are glad about some things. You're glad you're a millionaire for a day. You know what I mean? You're glad you have accomplished this or that. But it goes away. You've got to get something else to be glad about. And very often what you're glad about turns into poison. So, I mean, we can, some people might say it's just cheap psychology. It is, in a sense. It's simple psychology, but a lot of people don't deal with this. A good therapist would try to get you back to the heart, right? That's why existential psychoanalysis is at the heart of all the psychologies that I've ever learned, because it focuses on that ball of consciousness that you are, that ballroom chandelier with all the facets that reflect different conditions and thus different behaviors. The behavioral psychologists would agree with that. They would simply throw out the idea that there is a conscious self. I don't agree. There is a consciousness of these various false selves.
If there is anybody out there that does disagree, please start the conversation down below. Continue.
So anyway, you don't even have to believe in the ontology of it as I'm describing it. You can simply deal with the facts of it. You can deal with it. That's why existentialism is amenable to plays and novels and formal philosophy, psychology, enormous amount of psychology done, even in the heart of psychologists who are not considered to be existential psychologists, like R.D. Laing. Of course that's what he did when he dealt with the schizophrenics. He would go to the heart with them, and thus he was very successful with many schizophrenics. Brilliant man. Call it whatever you like. He wrote that brilliant book called The Politics of Experience. This is all about relationships. Wonderful book. An education for those who still would like to read and get their eyeballs out of the electronics.
That's classified as transactional analysis?
No.
No?
No. TA is something else. Not that he would disagree. I mean, I love TA personally. It's especially when you're just learning, because it's simple, you can observe it.
TA is its own school of thought on.
It doesn't necessarily disagree. In fact, you find in TA, I've read some people, and I certainly understand the dynamic of it. They would use Freud. They would use Sartre if they had to. You know what I mean? They would use anybody to reinforce what they see. And they talk about transactions, about people relating to each other. It's very excellent stuff. Very excellent. And the dynamic is so fluid, and it's all about what we people are interested in terms of drama. People love drama, and they love, if they are involved in watching something, they love dialogue. Intelligent people like dialogue, because it represents ideas and the relationship between people. There's that yearning, and there's that teaching of the separation. I mean, you can watch hardened dialogue where people just obviously don't care about each other or trust each other. I watched The Good Shepherd again recently, and Matt Damon plays the guy who eventually becomes the head of the CIA. And he's a wooden person. They talk about him in terms of his silence. The silence is deafening. He just listens. He just doesn't say a word to people who come to him. And then he'll speak only in terms of very practical, appropriate ways. But there's no relationship with him. What he is doing is defending the United States. He was what you would call a patriot, and he had to compromise himself in order to do. He had to be involved in murders, for instance. Very close to home murders. Amazing stuff. Excellent film, by the way. Excellent tutorial and very, very intense.
We're going back to the core of not transactional analysis, but what you were saying is
existential
psychology.
Yeah, as far as I mean, it's what I have focused on and which I use as the very hub of the wheel for myself. It's at the core. It's very close to the core. If there's a hub at the center of a wheel, and then there are various spokes going to the periphery, that's seemingly what happened when I got to understand existential thought. And I integrated it with Buddhism and every other thing that focuses on consciousness. And then throughout the years of teaching, whenever I teach a course, I always focused on the philosophers and the core of what they say, and it's always in consciousness. They all are speaking from the point of view of consciousness. So it became more and more of a grounding, as I've said. And what's interesting is that it's based upon, you can, right in the core of this is not just intellectual, but it's constituted of the experiences that you have from moment to moment to moment to moment. That's why it's so amenable. Existential psychology is so amenable to Zen Buddhism, I discovered.
So simply put, how would you describe what existential psychology is?
If it's used as a therapy, it's going to be permissive, and it's going to be accepting. It's going to be phenomenological, which means that it will perceive whatever the individual does or says and put it into a bracket and make it real. Even if the person says something crazy, it's going to be put into a bracket, and it's going to be put into the FOK. It's like putting it into a crucible and boiling it and boiling and boiling into trying to come down to what is at the heart of it. And in the process, everything about the person is going to be accepted. You listen. It's based upon the listening and acknowledging that you're accepting what the other is saying. You can go into the madness of an individual.
So a person describes their experience in life, and you're able to draw it back to their fundamental self.
If possible, but for yourself, that's what's going on.
Right.
You see, I'm not claiming to be some kind of healing therapist. I have counseled people, and basically, I'm at my best when I just listen. Any good counselor will listen. But you also have to show that you're acknowledging what they're doing and what they're saying, so that you have to make a response that reinforces the fact that they're not alone.
Right.
Okay? Because you can just sit there in silence. One person said to me, "Are you bored?" I was listening to his wife at a party one night, and she was going on and on for the 10th party in a row. And I just sat in silence. And I said, no, but I'm listening. I mean, you've got to protect yourself as well when you're listening. And it doesn't mean you put up a wall. It just means that you stay awake to what's going on. That's your wall. You live in the spirit. You live in the consciousness, which, of course, some behavioral psychologists threw away. There's no such thing as consciousness, which is as dumb a statement as, even more dumb than when Descartes said that animals screaming under the wheels of the cart are not really feeling any pain. Those are just the sounds of a mechanism. Okay? he had just reduced consciousness to intellection, which is absurd, obviously. These are all sentient. Here's the sentient being we carry with us every time we do this. This lunatic of a sentient being. There's not a whole lot of rationality going on there.
Right. Right.
But that's a very sensitive being,
Right.
you know? And we have that in common. And that to me is very close to the fundamental stuff of existence, but I don't need to go into that at this moment, because then they'll come after me with the butterfly nets. But we have talked about it. The fundamental stuff of existence to me is a kind of proto-consciousness, and when it emerges in sentient forms, it becomes much more aware of itself in different ways. But I think there is a proto-consciousness at the subatomic level. And so does Hemmeroff, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
He's way smarter than I am, right? If people can read his stuff and go onto his website and read all the mathematics. But if you listen to him talk, he's understandable. But he proves it all with his knowledge of physics. He is, what's his first name, David?
Stewart?
I don't remember, but Hemmeroff, he's a very brilliant anesthesiologist who is also teaching philosophy at the university in California at one of the California universities.
Berkeley?
I don't think so. No, I don't remember, but he's still working. He's a very brilliant man. And he does talk about a proto-consciousness at the subatomic level. But obviously it's not that same thing as what we do. I mean, would you like to be able to get back to your sense of proto-consciousness? What would that be like?
So you're talking about layers of awareness?
That's a way to put it.
How does that, how does one observe the layers of their awareness without creating the homunculus?
Oh, homunculus.
Homunculus.
It's not a Herman.
Herman.
It's homunculus. Homo, man.
Homunculus.
To little man within homunculus, little man within your head watching everything, and then inside his head there's little man.
Right, so the phrase that I heard
homunculus,
is Ghost in the Shell.
It just automatically, the homunculus theory automatically produces the infinite regress, that there's always somebody watching. And you can fiddle with this and have fun with it as long as you're not one of those people who always have to be certain, like some of the people I've known. Closure, they say closure, oh, too bad, because you're going to be very disappointed. You're going to have a limited understanding of things. How about
you creating a limit yourself on
you
understanding?
Absolutely, by imposing that you think you already know the truth.
Right.
So there's so many examples of creating the homunculus effect that you can't avoid them if you just look closely. It goes along with the idea that the mind and the body are separate. That's the real culprit in all of this. Again, we don't have to go into it in any great detail, but that split where we think that we are separate beings from the body, and thus that's the part that's going to go to heaven or to hell, or that is, whatever the truth of that is, that version of the self is incorrect. You are not just an intellect. And if you experience great pain, you will know that as a fact. You know, I mean, I did experience great pain, and not unlike many other people. And the first thought I thought was, while I was experiencing this very intense pain, was millions of other people in the world are having more than I am right this minute. Okay? And I'm not just saying that to sound altruistic, but I realized more. I always knew it, but now it took on more significance. And then the second was, you know, this is terrible, obviously. This is very difficult to, you know, I didn't think those terms, it was just. And then I've said this, and I don't wish a bad thing on anybody, but I've known people who claim that they're enlightened. And they should have an experience like that to teach them, to be asked the question, are you enlightened now while you're in agony? No, what are you? You're a writhing body. You're a writhing cluster of sensation. You're not enlightened. You can't escape this. You're suffering it just as much as anybody else. What makes you enlightened? That you know you're a consciousness? I knew it from when I was a child. I never thought I was enlightened. I've gone to the void as a child. I've spoken of it.
Define enlightenment. You're totally in alignment with life, without distraction, without separation, without filtration.
Excellent. And there's one more, without
Suffering.
You've transcended suffering. Because if you're not enlightened, then you've betrayed what Buddha was after. Ask Buddha what he was after. He was trying to end suffering in old age and death. That's what he saw. That's what he wanted to stop. And according to him, he did by transcending this world in its own way, realizing what he is. He went to the heart, and he realized what he was. And he went to it when he died. The void. He knew that he is the void. So let's say a kid has a dream again and again and again of being the void. It's not even a dream. He's awake, and his reticular activating system is shut down. And so he's awake, and he's without the function of the reticular activating system, which is to produce a sense of time and space. So there's nothing, and he's awake and nothing. Now, should he call himself enlightened? He experiences pain. He's not transcended suffering. He still has this tiny ego, which is full of like this. Remember the Star Wars thing, the Death Star? I mean, there's so much that's analogous in all of this. You can have so much fun with it.